Biden is a big proponent of unions, as you know, sometimes known as Union Joe, but he's pushing here. He said he's reluctant to, but he's pushing here. He's worried about the effects on the broader economy. Has he let you and your members down?
More and more Democratic politicians are coming out against President Joe Biden's plan to force a contract onto unionized rail workers, including even a high-profile conservative Democrat has come out against Joe Biden's plan here. So we'll get to all of this. I'll get to who that is. I'll get to who these progressives are that are coming out against Joe Biden here and standing up for the workers. I will also get to a clip from one of the heads of one of the unions and his argument. And I'll also show you a series of clips from CNN showcasing how they are framing this whole story in a very pro-corporate light. But I'll get to that later. So first here on this agreement. So this ridiculous statement from the White House here from Joe Biden saying, I am calling on Congress to pass legislation immediately to adopt the tentative agreement between railroad workers and operators without any modifications or delay to avert a potentially crippling national rail shutdown. This agreement was approved by labor and management negotiators in September. It was not approved by labor. It was agreed upon by labor leaders that they would bring it to their members. It wasn't agreed upon by the unions. I don't know how he can just blatantly lie in a statement like this, but he's lying here. On the day that it was announced, labor leaders, business leaders, and elected officials all hailed it as a fair resolution. Notice who's missing here. How about the actual members in the union? But again, they are being completely ignored here. The fair resolution of the dispute between the hardworking men and women of the rail freight unions and the companies in that industry. All right, so Joe Biden went on to Twitter as well to go on to say, let me be clear, a rail shutdown would devastate our economy. Without freight rail, many U.S. industries would shut down. And whose fault would that be? The workers are asking for paid sick days. That's it. They want some paid sick days, just a few. And this incredibly profitable industry, I'll get to how profitable they are unwilling to do just the bare minimum here. Now, yes, they did. I think they increased pay. They say it's historic, 24% pay raise for rail workers. I'm sure that doesn't apply, across the board evenly, but whatever. Yes, there's a pay raise there, but paid sick days, again, we're talking bare minimum stuff here, things that are just already normalized in many other countries, but for Americans, they have to fight for the bare minimum on a consistent basis. So the membership of 4 out of the 12 rail unions, including the largest, have voted against the proposal, sending their leaders back to the bargaining table for a better deal. But top Democrats are planning to force the contract on them through legislation in order to head off a massive rail strike in early December that could hurt the economy. Last thing here, before I get to clips and some more. So unions had originally asked for 15 paid sick days. That's it, 15, but are now demanding at least 4. 4. So look at who is willing to negotiate down here. They wanted 15, they're now down to 4, less than half of what they originally wanted. The railroad industry, which has raked in massive profits in recent years while driving workers into the ground, has refused to grant even a single paid sick day. The Brotherhood of Maintenance of Way Employees Division, BMWED, one of the major rail unions that voted to reject the tentative contract deal, said in a statement Tuesday that it is deeply disappointed by and disagrees with Biden's decision to pressure Congress to impose the inadequate agreement on workers. And can they afford it? Well, rail companies have estimated that it would cost roughly $688 million a year to provide 15 days of paid sick leave, which, by the way, again, they aren't even asking for now. But if they were to do that, 15 days of paid sick leave to rail employees who work long and erratic hours and are often expected to be on call 24 hours a day. To make matters worse, rail companies' attendance policies punish workers for calling out sick or taking a day off to see the doctor. So $688 a year. Sounds like a lot. Well, one company alone, just one company, made a record $6 billion in profit last year, one rail company. And Bernie Sanders has quoted the figures to be at $20 billion in profit last year for the entire industry. So $20 billion in profit, 15 paid sick days. If they were still asking for that, which they aren't, would cost $688. So we're looking at less than half of this number now for a industry that made $20 billion last year. Also, worth noting here, the data suggests that the money once spent on fully staffing locomotives is now spent on enriching shareholders through dividend payments and stock repurchases. So this from perfectunion.us. Take a look at this graph here while I quote them. They say from 2001 to 2009, the four rail firms spent $17 billion on dividend payments and stock repurchases. In the 8 years after the inflection point, that amount increased by nearly 4.5 times. So they have more than enough to actually spend on their workers, and instead it's going elsewhere. Now let's get to this clip. This is Michael Baldwin. He is the president of one of the major rail unions. Here is him making his case on CNN.
Final question, if I can. Biden is a big proponent of unions, as you know, sometimes known as Union Joe, but he's pushing here. He said he's reluctant to, but he's pushing here. He's worried about the effects on the broader economy. Has he let you and your members down?
Yes, to an extent, Jim. We're trying to address an issue here of sick time. It's very important, as we've already discussed, and this action prevents us from reaching the end of our process. It takes away the strength and the abilities that we have to force bargaining or force the railroads into a situation to actually do the right thing.
All right, so I'll get to some reactions here from politicians, Democratic politicians coming out against Joe Biden and standing with workers. I'll also get to, again, the supercut of CNN clips showcasing how they are framing this entire discussion. But first here, Union Joe. Yes, Union Joe. That was in the question from this CNN anchor that was posed to that union president there. A lot of the Union Joe is just completely made up out of thin air. Yes, there have been a few examples of things that Joe Biden has supported recently, like the PRO Act, but has not done enough to actually get it done. And sure, you can argue, but mansion, cinema, okay, whatever. You're president, maybe try a little harder, maybe put some pressure on your members, but whatever. He has come out, to support the Amazon union fight when that was big. But a lot of his moves, if you can call them that, have been performative. So in terms of actual legislation, anything actually passed to help workers, there's been very little of that, at least for him to be able to really take up the mantle of being Union Joe. So you can see there the president of that union is disappointed. Let me get to some reactions here. First, this is Jonah Furman, a fantastic labor reporter. He works for labornotes.org, so check him out. Fantastic work. Tweets out here, it is exceedingly rare in the U.S. for the White House to have direct control over union negotiations. This one was a layup. Put forward a bill to include paid sick days, cost the rail carriers a fraction of their insane profits, improves freight rail service, and Biden refuses. So when it comes down to it, it becomes very clear, if it isn't already clear, where Congress sits. They are with corporations. Regardless of the situation, regardless of how it may even help the actual industry to have these workers be able to take off sick days. They side with what business leaders want. So they side with them over forcing these sick days onto the companies. It's very clear. And as I'll get to, when you even have a conservative Democrat coming out against you, you've gone a little too far. But this was quote tweeted by Marie Newman here, who unfortunately is leaving Congress. She lost her recent race, but says, agree, paid leave should be the bare minimum. Workers and passengers deserve safety and quality. Good Lord, this is the U.S., not a third world country. Paid leave has to be part of the deal, period. AOC here saying railroad workers grind themselves to the bone for this country as their labor produces billions for Wall Street. They demand the basic dignity of paid sick days. I stand with them. If Congress intervenes, it should be to have workers' backs and secure their demands in legislation. Bernie Sanders, of course, at the forefront of all of these labor fights, says the corporate greed never ends. Last year, the rail industry made a record-breaking $20 billion in profits after cutting their workforce by 30% over the last 6 years. Meanwhile, rail workers have zero guaranteed paid sick days. Congress must stand with rail workers. Jamal Bowman also coming out in support of the workers here, saying, listen, I can't in good conscience vote for a bill that doesn't give rail workers the paid leave they deserve. We fumbled this and Build Back Better. We can't do that again. Corey Bush says every worker deserves paid sick leave. I will not support a deal that does not provide our rail workers with the paid sick leave they need and deserve. Rashida Tlaib saying last year the rail industry made a record-breaking $20 billion in profits. They can afford to give their workers paid sick leave. The rail industry must put the quality of life of their employees over profits. I stand with rail workers. Last one here. Burgess Everett, who is a reporter for Politico here. Hickenlooper. Democratic Senator Hickenlooper. Conservative Hickenlooper says of averting rail strike, any bill should include the 7 days of sick leave rail workers have asked for. So to actually update the Bernie Sanders tweet, he's planning to put an amendment to this bill to include, I think he said 5 to 7 sick days. So, and he will not support the bill unless those sick days are in there. And Hickenlooper. Now look, right now this is talk. It's all talk. We will see when it comes down to it what he supports, how he votes. But to have Hickenlooper come out against Biden and for the workers is kind of shocking. And I have to imagine there has to be some labor leaders or workers in his ear somewhere. Something is pushing him here in the right direction, because otherwise you would not normally see Hickenlooper on a very progressive side of this issue. And by the way, I shouldn't even say progressive side, just common sense side. People need sick days. Common sense. So it's not, left, right, center. It's just common sense. Last thing here. CNN Supercut. So this is, I think, put together by Steve Morris. He works for the Recount, who often put up these sorts of clips. So here is a minute showcasing how CNN is largely framing this discussion.
A rail strike is one of the most disruptive and expensive things that can happen to an economy.
A rail shutdown or strike would disrupt supply chains.
A strike means food prices could skyrocket.
Many experts are saying would be an economic catastrophe.
That could mean a big shortage and massive price hikes. Even gas prices could increase.
And it also could cost the economy $1 billion within the first week.
That would cripple the economy.
I'm not setting aside the concerns of your members, but are you and your members willing to stop the rails, in effect, and accept those costs to the U.S. economy?
Do you believe a strike is worth it if it cripples the U.S. economy and costs up to $2 billion a day?
More than $2 billion per day.
Is it worth it?
And on top of all of that, the holidays are right around the corner.
It's a little less than a month right before Christmas here.
Especially right before the holidays.
President Biden warning if that happened, it would devastate the economy if we had a strike like that. So joining me now to talk about this and a lot more is Bank of America. It's Brian Moynihan, Chairman and CEO, one of the biggest banks in the world.
That last one just cracks me up. Here to talk about this is Bank of America's CEO. I wonder who he sides with. So ridiculous. Look, it's fine to mention the impact on the economy that a strike would pose if you are going to properly frame the discussion around whose fault that is. These business leaders that are incredibly wealthy, people like Warren Buffett that owns one of these rail companies, $6 billion in profit in his company alone last year, and is unwilling to offer paid sick days. That's their problem, not the problem of the workers. That isn't their fault. They're fighting for the bare minimum here. Again, and every single host here, of course, has paid sick days, gets time off, makes a lot more money than any of these rail workers do. Yeah, but this is why they call it corporate media. In case you're wondering why they call it corporate media, this is why. They are a corporation and they side with corporations in all of their discussions. It's the way that every discussion is framed. So yes, they even had on that rail, that union president there that I showed you earlier. Yes, he was on the show. And the questions posed to him were framed from a corporate perspective. Every single one. But that's what they do. So it's going to be wild to see what happens here. This is getting down to the wire. Will this go through? What's going to happen? Are there going to be enough Democrats that are going to be against this? We're going to have to wait and see.